I'm Jeanette Pavini.
I'm Barbara Rogers.
I'm Dana King. Welcome to another edition of 30 Minutes Bay Area.
If your credit card is lost or stolen, you're protected by law for fraudulent charges over $50. But it's a different story with your cell phone, as Wendy Nguyen found out the hard way.
It was a regular night out in San Francisco, and my friends and I had gone to a restaurant. I was about to go out of the country.
What Wendy did not know, sometime during the evening, her cell phone disappeared from her pocket.
The next morning, I didn't think about it, went off to the airport. Obviously didn't pack my cell phone because I was traveling to a developing country.
Waiting for takeoff, Wendy thought her cell phone was in her apartment. But even before the plane left the ground, her phone had already made $99.33 worth of calls. It was just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, while Wendy was enjoying her vacation in Vietnam, her cell phone was hard at work in San Francisco. Around the clock, someone was making call after call after call.
When I got back, I searched all week at work and at home for my cell phone.
By the time Wendy finally reported the phone missing, the damage was done. Her phone bill went from $50 a month to $26,472.54.
I felt overwhelmed. I was just really scared.
It's a rising crime in America. An estimated 3 million cell phones will be lost or stolen this year. Many will wind up in the hands of criminals on speed dial. Wendy went to the police, who said there was little they could do. Stolen phones are a low priority. And what about her wireless company?
There was a coworker next to me who said, calm down. Surely if you call Singular, they'll recognize that this is not your fault.
Her coworker was wrong. Wendy's contract with Singular specified that she was responsible for all calls made before she reported her phone missing.
I guess I wasn't expecting the treatment that I got from Singular, realizing that I was a victim of a crime, and they were in no way kind of supportive of that. And the supervisor then told me, well, maybe you can file for bankruptcy.
Well, that's outrageous.
Steve Larson is executive director of the California Public Utilities Commission, the PUC. Does the California PUC, do you have a role in regulating cell phones?
We have very, very little to say about cell phones.
That's right. In consumer-conscious California, where there are regulations on everything from vending machines to tattoo parlors to fortune tellers, there's not a single state agency overseeing cell phones. So right now, who oversees the cell phone industry?
Federal government.
The federal
Federal
government.
Communications Commission.
And would you say it's heavily regulated, or is it?
It's not heavily regulated, no. I mean, but that's the purpose. The purpose was to stimulate competition and not to heavily regulate it.
In fact, the United States Congress deregulated the wireless industry in 1996 in order to promote the quick growth of new technologies and services.
And you can do it all on an LTE.
Deregulation worked well for the most part. Wireless went from being a relatively small multi-million-dollar business 10 years ago to over $100 billion in revenues last year, and with lots of new gadgets. But deregulation also allowed cell phone companies to set the terms and conditions of their services with little government oversight.
And that's created somewhat of a Wild West kind of situation.
Bill Nussbaum fights for consumer rights as lead attorney for the Utility Reform Network. But when it comes to cell phones, he says the law favors the companies.
I mean, basically you're on the hook. That's part of your contract. Contract says you're going to pay for the calls, that's what they're going to do, pay for the calls.
I just kind of felt all alone.
Wendy says she spent hours on her cell phone over the last 5 months disputing the charges.
Call the Singular person. That person would transfer me to the Singular supervisor, who would then transfer me to the AT&T wireless person, who would then transfer me to their supervisor, and back and forth.
She started getting calls from a collection agency. Her her credit was threatened and her bill was ballooning with additional late fees and interest charges on that $26,000.
Most of them are Guatemala, Honduras.
Wendy believes all of this could have been avoided if cell phone companies had a system to flag suspicious activity like credit card companies do.
For someone who typically spends under $50, why they would suddenly get a $26,000 bill and no one would question those charges at all or even alert them to it.
It's greed, unfortunately.
Nussbaum thinks the problem is fixable.
They could put a piece of software in that says that if there's a particular unusual activity, notify the customer. I don't think this is hard. I don't think it's expensive.
Just all hours of the day.
After months of frustration, Wendy called CBS 5 News. Shortly after we contacted Singular, the company notified Wendy that all charges would be dropped. They declined to talk on camera, but gave us this statement. If a customer's phone is lost or stolen, it is important to report that to us immediately, so the phone will be turned off and the customer will not incur additional charges. In this situation, the Singular customer had unusual circumstances. Singular took care of this customer, reinforcing that while we have customers in the millions, Singular serves them one at a time. And after all of this, Wendy is still a Singular customer.
If I quit my contract, I would have to pay a $250 fee. So I had to continue to be a Singular customer. I'm pretty much counting the days.
Singular is not the only wireless company with this policy. The PUC advises consumers to check their contracts. And even though the PUC has no enforcement power, cell phones are their #1 complaint, and they will try to mediate. Next year, Congress will debate new regulations for the wireless industry. Consumer advocates are already urging people to use their cell phones to call the representatives in Congress.